Well, welcome everyone to today's City Council meeting. It's November 25th, 2024. We're first going to get started with the roll.
Oh, Teresa Nielsen?
That's pronounced Nielsen.
Oh, no, it's
She's going to pay for that.
Sorry, it's the holidays.
All right, Ruth Conley? Jessica Andrade?
Present.
Diane Crocker?
Here.
Christopher McMorrin?
He's
Oh, looks like he is here.
There he is.
Good of his teeth.
McMorrin, are you there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Please say here.
Here.
Your name was called for.
Just kidding. And I am also here. Excellent. Well, really appreciate you all being here tonight. Tonight we're going to have public hearings on an annexation, a rezoning, a development code. We'll then also be discussing a couple of ordinances regarding psilocybin, and we have a resolution on the school zone fee before going into executive session. First on the agenda is public hearing, and I'm going to now open a hearing on case file PC 24-05, an application for annexation. So, sound official. The case file title is, we're looking at annexation at 602 South 15th Street, and the owner applicant is Martin Kribs. The order of tonight's proceedings shall be, first we'll go through a staff report, and we'll go through additional correspondence. We'll have the applicant's presentation. We'll then go hear public testimony in favor of the application. And we'll then have the public testimony in opposition of the application. And we'll have a neutral testimony. I will also mention at this point that if you want to give testimony, there's a sign-up form over here, and we encourage you to fill out that sign-up form. We'll not only encourage it, we'll require it. We'll then have questions for staff from the city council. Then we'll close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony or comment will be heard unless the council reopens the testimony for a specific question. Then we'll go into council deliberations and a final decision. So we ask that each person providing public testimony limit their comments to 3 minutes. And I'll let you know, or actually Councilor Causey will let you know when your time is up. We'll first hear from those in person, followed by any people that are online. And for those in attendance, please fill out that form. Do we have anyone signed up to give testimony remotely?
No, we don't.
Point of information.
Yep.
To clarify, this is for a specific public hearing, and we do not have regular public comments night.
We do. We don't, but we usually do those after any public hearing.
I just wanted to double check so that others are aware in case they wanted to speak on other matters. Because psilocybin is also an issue, and I know a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm happy to add. We can add a public comment period.
I just wanted to check in.
Yeah, we're happy to add a public comment period after the consent agenda. Happy to.
Mayor Jones.
Yes.
When would we declare any ex parte contacts or anything?
On the public hearing?
Yeah.
That will be after the public comment period.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So,
What? Oh, someone jumped in.
Yeah, this is your legal counsel. I apologize. I just are you just I apologize for interrupting, but as a point of clarification, are you hoping to get those ex parte contacts, conflicts, etc., disclosed before presentations or after presentations?
Was that a question for me or for?
Oh, just for your city council.
Yeah, so. Before the public, should we do it before the public comments?
Yeah.
It's a different script.
That's right, it's before.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to that part of the instructions yet.
Perfect.
So, we're getting there. Just keep following the script.
Yep. It will be right before the presentations.
Wonderful. I probably misheard, but just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. The city council will make a decision tonight, or the matter may be continued to a future time and date. If the matter is continued to a time in the future, this will be the only notice of that date that you receive. The criteria that apply to this decision are listed in the staff report, and these criteria are the criteria that the city council must use in reaching a decision. Your testimony and any evidence must be directed at these criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to the decision. Please describe how your comments relate to the criteria. Again, a decision on this application must be based on the applicable criteria. Despite the importance of other issues or concerns, the council can only base its decision on evidence that shows the application complies with the criteria. The city council's decision can be applied to the Land Use Board of Appeals, however. Failure to raise an issue in sufficient detail to allow the city council and the parties to an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other concerns related to the proposed conditions of approval in sufficient detail to allow the city council to respond to the issue precludes an action or damages in circuit court. Now, I ask members of the city council to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest, including any site visits. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Does anyone have any ex parte contacts that they would like to disclose? Councilor Crocker.
I drove by it today just to see in my mind where we were talking about. Well, it'll be fine.
Thank you.
And this is myself as well.
Thank you very much. Councilor McMorrin.
I just interacted with a few people on some like social media, like Facebook groups where folks had questions. I just pointed them to the application and kind of explained the process, but I didn't offer any opinions on what should or shouldn't happen.
Are you all? I also drove by the property just to take a look at it, and I plan to participate in the hearing. Everybody else? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we will now hear the staff report.
The city received an application for annexation of a 1.59 acre parcel as shown in the packet. Upon annexation, the default zoning for the property will be low density residential or R1. The annexation application will be reviewed independent of any other applications with its own findings, hearing, and approval process. Following this review, a separate hearing will be held for a zone change and comprehensive plan map amendment with its own finding, hearing, and approval process. The Philomath Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 4th, 2024, following which it approved findings of fact and recommended the City Council approve this application for annexation. The City Council may either adopt the findings of fact recommended by the Planning Commission as presented, or modify the findings of fact following a public hearing and deny the application. If denied by the City Council, then the property owner may file an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA. The criteria found in the Philomath Development Code is used to determine whether the application is complete and if the answers and materials provided by the applicant satisfy the applicable criteria. The purpose of the hearing is to determine if the application conforms to the applicable criteria as required by the Philomath Development Code, and decide whether to approve or deny the application based on the applicable criteria. We received one written comment on the annexation, which was included in the report. The city engineer's comment was added to the condition of recommendation related to the concept plan and Exhibit D. The findings of fact are as follows. Benton County deemed the existing private septic system as failed, and due to the proximity of city services will not allow replacement of the septic system. The subject property is approximately 1.59 acres that has a single unit detached house and 2 outbuildings located in the city's UGB and abutting/adjacent to the city along its northern, eastern, and southern lot lines. The comprehensive plan designation of the property is urban growth boundary, low density residential, LDR. Upon annexation, this land would be zoned Philomath low density residential, R1. The property could be built up to 8 tax lots, each with its own ADU, totaling up to 16 dwelling units. The annexation is consistent with the purposes of the Philomath Development Code, policies of the comprehensive plan, all requirements of all city ordinances, and other applicable policies and standards adopted by the city. The city is able to provide water, wastewater, storm drain, park, and street services upon annexation of the property. The annexation application criteria and findings. Philomath Municipal Code Chapter 18.135 details the criteria for evaluating annexations. A, statement of process. The process of annexation of land to the city allows for orderly expansion of the city and for adequate provisions of public facilities and services. The city charter requires that annexation and or extension of city services beyond city boundaries may only be approved by a majority vote of the electorate. The property owner is requesting the city of Philomath approve annexing a 1.59 acre parcel as shown on the included map. Upon annexation, the default zoning for the property would be Philomath Low Density Residential, or R1. The property owner is primarily seeking to annex this lot into the city to gain access to city services. Benton County inspected the septic system and confirmed it has failed. Since the property has access to water and sewer from the city, the county will not allow rebuilding or replacement of the existing private septic system. Current state law prohibits the city from sending this annexation to the electorate for approval. Section B is related to voter approval. Current state law prohibits the city from sending this annexation to the electorate for approval, so this section is not applicable. Requirements for applications. Number 1, written consent. The application by the owner serves as consent to annexation. 2, legal description. A legal description of subject property is provided in the annexation boundary description on the Kribs annexation exhibit submitted with the applications and findings. 3, a map. The property owner has supplied a map depicting the subject property, surrounding areas, city limits, and UGB. 4, sufficient information for city staff to allow for the completion of an impact analysis on existing water supply and facilities and existing sewer, drainage, transportation, park, and school facilities. The city's ability to provide municipal services to a highest, greatest impact conceptual development was done assuming the current standard of 5 dwelling units per acre, not including ADUs. On this property, this would be up to 8 dwelling units. Public Works reported that for this small of a development, the impact on sewer, water, storm drain, park, and transportation systems would be minimal and well within the city's ability to provide this level of service. 5. Impact analysis on community partner services. The Philomath School District will provide school facilities. With an expected student population of 0.5 students per household, the district will have to accommodate an additional 8 students. Impact to library and fire services are similarly expected to be minimal and well within the current abilities of these outside agencies. 6. Additional facilities. Staff does not foresee the need for any new off-site public facilities needed to service this relatively small property. 7. Source of financing. No additional off-site public facilities are anticipated as a result of this annexation and future development. 8. A conceptual development plan. The applicant has submitted a conceptual site plan showing 16 housing units on a single tax lot. The R1 zone would require 8 separate tax lots, each with up to 2 dwelling units, and the second unit being an ADU. Although the conceptual plan is not an accurate reflection of the allowed layout under the R1 zoning, it does show the resulting impact of 16 dwelling units, including ADUs, thus meeting the criteria. 9. Map amendment and rezone will be considered with the rezone proceeding after the annexation discussion. Again, this hearing is only for the annexation. 10. The application fee. The property owner paid the applicable annexation fee. City staff shall review the application and recommend approval if it contains the material required under this section. Staff deemed the application complete on October 14th, 2024, and proceeded with the review. Staff evaluation. City staff shall prepare a report that considers information submitted by the applicant as well as other sources of relevant information, including but not limited to master utility plan, regional and transportation system plans, and population studies. The report shall also include an updated land use inventory with the development status of all similarly zoned properties. From this information, a finding shall be made that the city has the capacity to provide required utility services in light of commitments already made to other developments. The following report includes an updated land use inventory with the development status of all other similarly zoned properties. From this information, the findings are made that the city has the capacity to provide required utility services in light of commitments already made to other approved developments. So in the analysis that will be after this, the number is 16 units. The city's current water production capacity is 2.18 million gallons per day. The current city peak demand is 1.685 MGD. And the additional peak day demand from the Kribs annexation property based on the assumptions above is 0.010 MGD. The water system has adequate capacity to serve the development if it were to be developed at the maximum assumed density with R1 zoning at this time. The wastewater system has a reserve capacity of 0.080 MGD during dry weather conditions. Of this amount, the proposed development would consume 0.004 MGD. Therefore, the water system has adequate capacity to serve the development if it were developed at the maximum assumed density for R1 zoning at this time. There is capacity for storm drainage for this development. At the time of development, the property owner will be responsible to provide storm drainage improvements which conform to both city and county standards as applicable. There do not appear to be any projects in the 2018 Philomath Transportation System Plan, or TSP, affecting the property. South 15th Street has ample capacity for future development of this property. The city's Parks and Trails Master Plan have ample capacity to service the future development of this property at the R1 zoning. In summary, staff finds that the city has the capacity to provide the required utility services in light of commitments already made to other approved developments. This criterion is met. Review criteria. There are 8 criteria that city staff must review for the proposal. The annexation application has been reviewed and analyzed against the city's development code and applicable policies in the city's comprehensive plan. The following review provides staff's analysis. 1. Property to be annexed must be located entirely within the UGB of the city. The property to be annexed is located entirely within the UGB. This criterion is met. 2. Property to be annexed is, or upon annexation will be subject to the city's comprehensive plan. The application includes a review of the city's comprehensive plan policies and goals. Staff have reviewed the application's analysis in relation to the following comprehensive plans and goals. The following are applicable in the review of this section: citizen involvement, housing, urbanization, public facilities and service, and public facilities and service. Staff concludes that the annexation or application for annexation conforms to the applicable comprehensive plan policies. This criterion is met. 3. At least one lot or parcel of the property to be annexed must be contiguous to the city limits or separated from the city limits only by a public right-of-way or a body of water. As shown on the map provided in the application, the subject property is contiguous to the city limits. Specifically, it is adjacent to the city limits along the southern, eastern, and northern borders. This criterion is met. 4. Annexation of the property must be of benefit to the city and community of Philomath. Annexation of the property would allow for additional housing, which is seen as a benefit this annexation would provide to the city and community. The criterion is met. 5. If the property to be annexed is or has been zoned for or used for industrial or agricultural purposes, the inventory of known contaminants and how they would be abated by the applicant must be provided with the application for annexation at the time the application is filed. The property to be annexed is not, nor has it been zoned or used for industrial or agricultural purposes. This requirement is not applicable. 6. If the property is to be annexed or has been used for industrial or agricultural purposes, a Phase 1 environmental assessment by a certified company shall be performed prior to annexation. This requirement, based on the standard above, is not applicable. 7. When a property to be annexed exceeds 30 acres, in which this property is less than 2 acres, this requirement is not applicable. Properties that include existing development must have a safe pedestrian route to school within 18 months of annexation. The subject property has a vacant house on it. As a condition of approval, a safe pedestrian route to school must be constructed within 18 months of annexation, or the house must be demolished. This criterion can be met with this condition of approval. Staff concludes that the application for annexation meets the applicable criteria as set forth by the Philomath Municipal Code. The condition of approval that we would be recommending on this is that a safe pedestrian route to school must be constructed within 18 months of annexation, or the house must be demolished. Staff is prepared recommended motion for after your deliberation. And with that, do you have any questions?
Yep, Councilor Andrade.
No.
Sorry, I thought I saw your hand up. Councilor Crocker.
The safe to schools, does that include the middle school and the elementary school?
Honestly, Chris, I don't think.
Just be connected to the existing sidewalk system is typically the requirement. Right now, there's no sidewalk directly in front of this home.
So what it would be is like where it'll go up to that street to the north, and then I'll have pedestrian crossing there to connect to that existing sidewalk.
The more direct route to the middle school would be up Chapel. Is there a sidewalk there now?
There's not on this side of the road, so that's really what this was pointing at, is they'd be required to get that sidewalk installed along the frontage.
I have a question. Yeah. Could you help me understand, so it's 8 tax lots, each with its own ADU. So that means there's a house and an ADU on one tax lot?
So yeah, that would be the assumption there, that like with the R1 zoning ones, they would be entitled as long as they have the setback requirements to construct an ADU.
Okay.
So the analysis that we had to do would be based on 8 single family houses with 8 ADUs, or 16 units in the analysis.
Are Are the ADUs, do they have to be smaller than the house?
Yes. Limitation in our code would be 900 square feet would be the limitation.
Okay, there will be additional opportunity for more in-depth questions. So, is there any additional correspondence beyond those items included in the agenda packet? Any additional correspondence?
No, not at this point.
We will now hear the applicant's presentation. Please join us. Yeah, introduce yourself.
I'm Martin Kribs, Marty Kribs, I live on Moose. I did not prepare much of a presentation today. The staff report is very comprehensive and I think covers most of the criteria. I did bring some preliminary character images of what we had planned for the buildings. If that would be helpful, if you guys would like to see, or if that's appropriate for this meeting.
Less appropriate for the annexation.
I think you could do it as part of the conceptual drawing that's required. If you wanted to show, we have the map that you provided showing the conceptual layout. If you wanted to provide some maybe elevation drawings.
Yeah.
I think if you wanted to submit those into the record as part of that conceptual design, that would be okay. I'll just remind the council that it's conceptual, it's not held to it. It's different than like a site design review. If you submit renderings with the site design review, that's what you're submitting to build. At this level on an annexation, the requirement's just a conceptual to give you an idea of what could be developed there. And what we're really looking for is maximum build out, right? Like what's the maximum impact it's gonna have. So I think it's appropriate. I'll just give that caution here. You can submit to the record and we can pass them around if you like.
Okay.
I could move them around too.
They're all the same.
Yeah. So, generally speaking, if we're intending to do kind of a cottage cluster pocket neighborhood type development, it's our intention for it to be, market housing. We're intending to live there ourselves, and we want it to be a nice project and fit in with the neighborhood. And I think there's a few things that to point out. And part of the reason why I presented there is, because we're in the floodplain, we're having to elevate the structure above the baseball elevation, and in doing that, we're most likely going to provide storage along with the units. So, in a project like this with small housing, one of the issues is there's often inadequate storage, and there's a lot of things, debris and so forth, and people's stuff that's unsightly. So anyway, we're planning a lot of storage to get that. Not an issue. In addition, we're because of this application, we're treating our stormwater runoff. So under normal development criteria, we wouldn't have to do that. It'd just be part of the street runoff.
Excuse me, sorry. Do you mind speaking up, please? I'm not sure Councilor McMorrin can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Got some online people.
And that's really it. I mean, and mainly it's very simple. And I think you did an excellent job of presenting all the criteria, and that's all I have to present.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mayor Jones.
We will after everything. We'll give a chance for a rebuttal, so you'll have a chance at the end.
Should I be excused or should I stay?
You can step aside now. We'll offer opportunity for others to speak. Councilor McMorrin, we have a question period after the different presentations?
Oh, yes, I was just gonna, I could not hear any of that. I don't know if it's possible for people who are speaking to speak louder or be closer to the microphone or something. I got like 2 words of that. I just wanted to
Yeah.
say.
We'll remind folks to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Please step forward. Did you already sign in? Okay. Michelle Reeves.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Hello, Michelle Reeves, Philomath. And I'm just here to speak in favor of the Kribs annexation. My husband and I moved into this community 3 years ago. We purchased our property, and it's right across the street from the property that's being considered. We've loved Philomath. We've loved the small town. When we moved here, we actually got to know Marty's dad, and he was the current owner of the property, and got to know him pretty well. Our kids went over and saw him, and you know, he passed away, and then Marty came and said he was planning on building. I was excited. I thought, you know, that's his dad always wanted the property to be used to help people, and I think this type of development is perfect for helping people. When we moved into our house, it was our first house. We could finally afford a house with a family, and these types of smaller houses are going to be perfect for people who want to, you know, get into a smaller community. I think that's evidenced by the fact that he wants to build small. You know, a lot of people might come in and want to build a big apartment complex or something, but he's wanting to keep it small. He's wanting to live here and be a part of that. I asked him the other day. I said, you know, what's your plan? I didn't know what his plan was. He goes, well, we're going to live here. And I thought, that's great. He's to still be my neighbor. And then also, I know a lot of people think about having, I can see the trees from the property in my backyard. I can see across the street. And I realize that, a lot of people, want the natural development, and I get that. And I love just seeing trees and the beauty of nature, but we live in Oregon. There's plenty of really great places around us that we can go. I go to Ball Hill all the time. But in a city like this, small houses, a development within the city lots is perfect for what we need. And really, it's people that make a community. And so, the people that are going to move in here are going to be part of our community. They're going to be working, they're going to be sending their kids, maybe small families, that just need to start a home or something that they can move into. So I just really encourage you to approve the annexation, and I just thank you for taking the time, and thank you for hearing me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any additional testimony in favor of annexation? Okay. Seeing none, does anyone in opposition to the application wish to speak? We have Michael.
I retired 7 years ago, and apparently so did all my computer skills, because I've had nothing but problems all day, and I apologize. I will get you a copy of my
And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, you got 3 minutes.
Michael Henthorne, my wife Susan, and I live at 740 South 15th. We've been there 8 years. We've been in the community since 1987. When we bought that home, we thought we were in the country as much as we assumed when we watched the sunrise to the east until the Mill Pond development went in. But that problem really has not gotten better with time. It is a mess of a development, and we are living it nearly every winter when flooding occurs. I submitted copies of photographs taken by Mike Thompson. His wife Mary is here if you wish to ask any questions about those photographs. Those photographs were taken during a flood event, and they are taken of the subject property. And I would estimate that water to be about 2 feet deep in that particular flood condition. Mike said Mary had another one of a kayaker going through that area also, but we didn't have a copy of it to give to you. Susan and I have lived through 4 floods in the 8 years that we have been on our property. We know how the water moves through the area. When it comes through with quite a velocity. The previous owners of our property lost their entire fence line to the force of the flood that came through. It doesn't last all that long, but when it comes through like a river. And you have to be prepared for it. My concern on the size of the development and the density of this development and the location of this development is what happens in the winter on the south end of Philomath, not what happens in July. I'm aware that there's only an 8-inch sewer line running down the west side of 15th Street, which seems rather small when you consider the amount of storm runoff that we have to deal with in the winter months. I'm also concerned about the density of parking that is on 15th Street. We have seen people who have bought homes in that area with up to 4 or 5 cars, which means that they are parking full-time on 15th Street. I'm afraid to look at this development and assume that they never have guests over, they never have family visits, they never have parties.
30 seconds? You have 30 seconds left.
Okay. So 15th Street only looks to get busier with an additional development at that level. I would only speak for myself in saying I'm not concerned until we get to the point of adding additional density beyond how it is currently zoned. If you approve it at its current zoning level, there's still an opportunity to make money on that development, but not at the level of 16 homes in an acre and a half.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Don. Hold. Thank you, I couldn't quite read that.
I've lived in Philomath for about 40 years, and if you don't know where I live, you've all driven by the pigeon loft. So I have the racing pigeons on 13th Street. I can testify to what Mike says about the flooding, but that's not my main concern, is the infrastructure of the road system that we have in existence. If we look at how people enter and leave Philomath, there's 4 main entrances and exits. 19th, main highway, north or east-west, and 13th Street. And I think we have a bunch of pirates that live south 13th, because from 25 to 55, they think is a guideline, not a law. And it's a speedway. The other 3 entrances and exits to Philomath all have bike paths and walkways. 13th Street barely has the white line that disappears as soon as it ages. And you've got pedestrians, you've got the parade, you've got bike races, you've got walkathons and everything else on 13th Street. I've already seen 2 deaths due to the lack of infrastructure on that stretch between Chapel and Philomath. I don't want to see any more. Before we go and do anything more, I would love the council to enforce, encourage, whatever. I had a conversation with Chris. The problem is, as soon as you leave that 25, it's now Benton County. But yet, Philomath still manages that stretch. The parade was a good example. Philomath officers shut it down and controlled it. No one wants to take responsibility for it because the Benton County says, well, it's Philomath. And Philomath says, well, you know, you get into this, who's gonna own up to it? We've got a beautiful park there. We've got the rodeo grounds. We've got 2 baseball fields, and they are full at certain times of year. And guess where those people are going? Down 13th Street.
30 seconds.
The annexation here, the kids want to ride around the block. Guess what block they're riding on? 13th Street. To get around. So in order to make it safer, I don't think we're gonna see a bike path in the near future. But tomorrow, we could put up a speed sign to slow it down. If nothing else, it'll get more revenue for tickets. But I don't wanna see another death on that road simply because people hit that 25 in and they floor it. The other thing is,
Thank you. I'm sorry, but your time is up.
okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Next, we have Drew Kell.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So yeah, my name's Drew Hill. Just moved into 622 South 15th Street, so the neighboring lot. First time family homeowners. Got my wife and two boys, 2 and 1 year old. So we're excited to be in the neighborhood. Going into the buying process was new to us, so finding this out was kind of, threw us for a loop, kind of a curveball, just because of the integrity of the house, right? We're looking at what we bought versus what's to come. I do have signed petitions in here that I can pass around, but try to get through this before 3 minutes is up. So I decided with Mike, what he said earlier about the flood. I do have those pictures as well. If you guys didn't see them, I saw this being passed around. So a lot of them, that's the main issue is kind of the overflow, right? The runoff, the septic system that's already in place there. I mean, it's only gonna affect us as well, being on the same street, on the same side, and the same flood zone. My understanding, the opposite side of the street is not quite in that flood zone, but we are, so we're directly affected by that. Speak on part of my family, looking out our window is this property that's being annexed. So the change in that kind of changes the landscape of what we think Philomath is like. I know one of the neighbors mentioned earlier about the trees and stuff, but that's what we really appreciate, and it might be a being drum, but that's what we like. Our boys enjoy the deer that run through there. We have the 2 boys, but the whole community or the whole neighborhood has kids. I see it all the time. They're throwing the football out on that street, on 15th Street, right before the stop sign. So there is some guidelines through there, but with the addition of 16 houses, right, in this pocket neighborhood, it's going to increase traffic through that zone, limiting the opportunities for kids to play out there. Like you mentioned earlier, trying to improve the sidewalks. There's limitations on the other side of the sidewalk as well. Just the narrowness of it, that might not affect you guys, but it affects us, essentially. And then just the value of which the neighborhood is already growing. There's housing opportunities growing on 16th Street already. So I see that there's a need for homes, but I don't think that the one that's going to be crowding the area per se would be beneficial. So we oppose that. And then, yeah, this is speaking from our perspective, coming in here, the concerns of health risks of that overflow, kind of commingling with the already septic system will cause health concerns for everybody. And unless somebody does something about Mary's River and stuff, it's not going to change that much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to submit those petitions into the record?
Yeah.
Do you have copies for us, or do you
I do.
need
I have
copies?
all the time.
And next we have Mr. John.
Thank you.
before my time starts, I was the kayaker. Getting the neighbor's outhouse for their property that was floating away. So I am 1 house over from him, 640 South 15th Street. I've moved out of there. Philomath did not work for me as I had an adult foster care there. They allowed the addition across the street, which I don't have a problem with, other than the fact that they weren't supposed to have access to 15th. It was supposed to be another street. That got changed. You guys allowed for sidewalks that were not ADA. So I would be taking a resident for a walk and have to go out into the street and then back because those sidewalks are not adequate for ADA. So I've got concerns about putting in another project and not being up to code. I'm concerned about the traffic and doing 16 units, 8 units, having houses for single families and stuff, but that seems like it's, Usually those little houses are for, you know, grandparents or something like that, and it sounds like this is a business thing, to do more housing and a small housing, so I've got some real concerns about that as well. I know there's no environmental study, but we're saying this is a health annexation. I am concerned because actually my house was in the county when I first got it, and I'm still on the well, even though I've been annexed in and I've got sewer. So, but has any studies been done about that? I mean, I've heard rumors that his septic is dumping into that pond. He had, you know, he had bees, which aren't a big deal. He had geese in there and animals every now and then, even though it wasn't used for farm. But I am concerned about my well. Now that I'm hearing about this, has there been any studies or anything done on that? You know, so I have a concern there, definitely. I know Mary, they're on city water. But they also have a well for irrigation and stuff that they can use on their property, and it's right next to them. So I've definitely got concerns about the health annexation and what's being done there. I'm worried about the traffic. I'm worried about, you know, ADA. I mean, I ended up building a new home in Kribs and getting out of Philomath because it wasn't safe for me to do my residence there anymore. And, you know, it's kind of sad that somebody has to move because they don't feel that it is okay, and you know, the city allowed for, yeah.
You got 30 seconds.
Okay, so I mean, those are my main concerns. You know, so yeah. Hang on.
Thank you. Next, we have Malcolm Rosie.
Hi, how many people were here in '96? Applegate was flooded. There was only one lane that way. So I know for a fact that had to be 3 or 4 feet underwater. 98 wasn't much better. As long as the Marys River hits the Willamette and the Willamette's up, the Mary's gonna back up. And that's where the problem lies. And until you can resolve that problem, this area is gonna be a flood zone. Fire Chief Dennis Schiedler, I don't know how many people, he lived on the corner of Chapel and 13th Street, within an inch of going into his house in '96. And it was raised. So you have an issue with the flood, and I don't care what you do to resolve it until you can fix the Willamette and the Marys River. This is gonna be an ongoing problem. And it does it about every 30 years. We're due again, because it was 96, now we're 224. So it's gonna be, it happened in '62, Columbus Day. I don't know how many people remember the Columbus Day storm. So unless you address those issues, you're not gonna, I don't care what you do, unless you raise that up 4, 5, 6 feet. You'll have to get together with the Corps of Engineers to find that out. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you all for that. Do we have any neutral testimony?
I have a question. It sounds like we're talking about the annexation and the development proposal at the same time, but I thought we were really talking about the annexation now, and then the development will be a little later.
We are only discussing the annexation now.
And I don't have a testimony.
Okay. Anyone have neutral testimony? So, are there any final questions? Well, I'm sorry. Does the applicant wish to offer a rebuttal? Anything you heard?
Do we have a minute to discuss?
Sure. For sure.
They definitely show up in some things. So good.
Have you sit down up here and then please speak up.
So, appreciate the comments.
Okay, sorry everyone, can we please give the speaker, the applicant his attention?
I'm Martin Kribs and the applicant. So, just going through the concerns, I mean, chief among them the floodplain. So we're aware of the flood insurance rate map that was made by FEMA and the adoption of that rate map for the city. And we are designing within the criteria that is necessary to comply with that map. You know, in the transportation concerns, I think have been well covered in the staff report. And regarding the safe access to schools and the sidewalk, we're also providing those as required by the development in the staff report. And the concerns over the sewer health and safety, because we are connecting with the city sewer, we're fixing and addressing, I think, all of those concerns. So there's possibility the concern exists. I mean, the well is too close to the septic system now is really the chief concern for us, and we're connecting the sewer, so that will repair that concern. That's all I have.
Are there any final questions from the city council or the applicant? Councilor Carr.
Two. Are you taking down the house that exists now? I'm
That is
assuming
planned, yeah.
with that. And then are you taking the septic system out?
Well, I think we abandon it. I don't think we have to remove it.
Can you seal it or do anything like that, or is that not necessary?
I'm not sure what's required for abandonment. We'll do whatever's required. There will be a requirement for Benton County to have that professionally done, and we get a copy of that at the time that the building permit's submitted. That comes to the city, and we make sure that it's done properly.
Councilor Nielsen.
On page 3 of 6, it says additionally, the proposal is not utilizing fill and will be using flood flow through to prevent increased flooding downstream. Is that typical, or is that an exception to what we normally do? Yeah.
Let me pause, and I should have spoke. We really just want to ask him specific
Oh, okay.
questions on the building, and you'll have a chance to ask staff
Okay.
questions on this when we get into deliberation more. So just questions specific to him and the application is probably most appropriate right now.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question. If I'm not allowed, they can stop me and you don't have to answer. With 8 tax lots, from what I'm understanding, and an ADU with each of those, is that the vision of home ownership for the one and a rental for the ADU? Or how do you envision, what's the design purpose in that? Is that for having the one tax lot, the 2-bedroom be owner, and then the ADU be a rental? Because they're one tax
I will
lot.
remind you that this is the annexation and doesn't do anything to.
Okay, right. Thank you. Then don't have to answer.
Any other questions for the applicant on annexation? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Oops. Okay, so does council have any further questions of staff?
Oh, is that me now? Yeah. I'm still learning. All right. Did you hear my question?
Yeah, page
Okay,
3.
Yes, correct.
3, you said 3 of 6.
3 of 6, yes.
Oh, are you on?
I'm on,
I think you're on, you're on
Staff
the
report.
you're on the rezone.
Right.
So I can, do I wait to answer till at that point, since that one's in the.
Just looking at the annexation.
Okay.
Let's save that question.
Yeah.
I can do that.
That's an invalid question.
I can do that.
So other questions from council for staff? On the annexation.
This annexation or plan where he's gotta put in the sidewalks. And if he doesn't, the house gets torn down, but if the house is already torn down, I don't know the purpose of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so, with the safe route to school in that condition, so if a house is still there, then they have to build it, whether, like, let's say in the case recession happens and nothing develops, but that existing house, the property owner would be required in development to add that sidewalk. If, it ends up being where they demolish the house, then the sidewalk would have to be put in at the time the property is developed. So that's the condition on that, to be part of the safe routes to school.
We don't want to annex a property into the city limits, have people living there and never put a sidewalk to connect it to a safe route to the schools or safe route to get around. And so that's why the requirement's in there. It's on situations where there's future development pending, it's going to happen when the development happens. But in case the development doesn't happen, this condition of approval will require that the sidewalk go in at least 18 months from the time it gets annexed.
Requesting the public.
One moment. I'll just note that Councilor McMorrin joined us at 6:57. Councilor Nielsen, you had another question?
Okay, absolutely. Yes. So then you just tell me if I can ask this question. Okay. In considering the annexation, do we take into consideration the flooding that previously happened with that?
Yeah, with, the flooding, that's gonna be a little more discussed in the rezone with the type of development. So it's like, in the annexation, it's looking at, it's like whether it is inside the urban boundary or surrounded by city limits. If they're required to access city services, that's another reason that, they would have the right to ask for annexation.
So the flooding issue is not one of the criteria associated with annexation?
Correct, not in the annexation. Because in the annexation, that's gonna be assumed, it's gonna be rezoned to what the default standard would be.
Any other questions for staff from the council?
If I have a voice, let me just add on to that answer if I could, just to be really clear on the floodplain, because it is a concern. At annexation, we recognize that it's there. It's why we require they submit the maps and everything, so we want to know it's there. But really, floodplain is an issue that's dealt with at the time of development and the type of developments there. Our development code allows for building in the floodplain, and there's very specific guidelines there that come from the state and from FEMA, from the feds, on what type of development can take place within the floodplain. You have to put them up on risers. If you're in a crawl space, you have to put it, I won't give you the exact ratio because I can't tell you off the top of my head, but you have to have venting in your crawl space to allow for the flood to flow through as if the house wasn't there. So there's all of these criteria that have to be done at the time that you're building the structure. So if it was just an outright ban to allow any type of development in the floodplain at all, then it would be relevant. But the fact that you're allowed to develop within a floodplain, it becomes irrelevant when we're looking at annexations and even really zone changes. It becomes irrelevant because we're really looking at that at the time of their development plans and what they're actually building. And we're going to make sure that their building plans are going to meet our criteria within our development code. So it's not really relevant for those reasons, not so much that we don't care, we just recognize that it's at the planning phase when they're going to be required to do it, not at the annexation stage.
Councilor Nielsen?
On point 4, the findings of facts, it says a property could be built out up to 8 tax lots. Could that, would that be changed if they were annexed into more than 8 tax lots in that, or is that the max, even with the changing?
So for the R1, that would be the maximum that they would be allowed to do under the R1, and that also includes public street that with the 56-foot right of way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Any other questions? Okay. Does staff need to respond to any questions or issues raised by any of the testimony?
The only thing there was one thing that was brought up about concern of the flood rise, but as Chris was saying, that kind of goes beyond. But I just want to give context of in the assumption that the annexation and the rezone is approved at the building, site design review, we would put conditions with respect to the floodplain. And then there would be a floodplain permit that they would have to submit with the building permit that have to meet all of the floodway overlay standards, which since the federal government's not allowing any fill, then it has to be, they have to do flow through with a no rise. So it would be a no rise certificate to show that the development's not going to raise waters downstream from that. So that's at the building permit phase. That's something that we would have to take into consideration. Prescriptive set of standards they would have to abide by.
Thank you. You're welcome. And so if annexed, then it will automatically go to R1, low density residential, unless rezoned. Okay. I look at my script, make sure I don't forget anything.
Can I make one comment about the on 15th Street that was mentioned, because I do feel it's relevant. There was a comment made about the sidewalks on 15th Street not being ADA compliant, and that's not a correct statement. The sidewalks are ADA compliant. 48 inches is a requirement, and those sidewalks are built to be 5 foot wide. So
No, they're not. You can't get a wheelchair bar. You got telephone posts sticking up.
Sorry.
We have city standards, and the city standards for streets and sidewalks meet ADA compliance, and those streets were built to that compliance. So prior to Mill Pond going in, there was no sidewalks on either side, and it wasn't compliant at that time. But on the east side of the road, where 15th Street is, those sidewalks are compliant. There wasn't sidewalks on the west side of the road that were required at the time Mill Pond was put in. The developer's only required to do a 3/4 road improvement. So that's what they did, and if you'll recall, the county put in some additional money to finish developing the remainder of the west side of the road, but didn't include the sidewalks. That was going to be left to the property owners at the time that those properties were developed. So, but again, I just wanted that misstatement to be corrected.
And there were a bunch of comments about the street capacity. Michael, can you just reference street capacity and parking along the street?
And there was more of an analysis, I believe, is in the rezone.
And we'll get there for the rezone, but
yeah, the analysis is going to be, so in the assumption of eight single family lots, it would raise the amount of vehicles to 90 extra vehicle trips daily, compared to if we go beyond the scope of this and it goes to 60 units, and the calculation on that, it would go from 90 to 160. And according to our city engineer, that still keeps it at a level of service that that is passable.
Last opportunity for answering staff or questions from staff. With that, the public hearing is now closed. And we can have council deliberations. So no request. Okay. Oh, sorry. Before I close the public hearing, does the applicant wish to waive its 7-day period to submit a final written argument after the closing of the record?
Yeah.
Okay. With that, the public hearing. So now we will have a deliberation by the council, and then our final decision on the matter. Any points of deliberation?
My understanding of our task is to see if it is legal, if it meets all of our qualifications. It's not necessarily how we feel about it or anything, but if it's legal, then we looked. Is that correct?
If it meets the criteria, we need to judge it based upon the criteria that's set before us. If we go in opposition to the criteria, then there could be an appeal filed, and then it would go to LUBA. Yep. Counselor Causey.
I move to adopt the findings of fact as presented in the staff report dated November 14, 2024, planning file PC 24-05, and approve the application for annexation with the included condition of approval.
Thank you. So we have a motion made by Counselor Causey and seconded by Counselor Crocker. Any further discussion, comments, or questions? Counselor McMorrin.
I was planning to say this before a motion, so I don't know if it's perfectly germane, but I just was going to say on the sidewalk piece, I feel like there's maybe two separate things, whether or not the sidewalks meet the legal definition of ADA accessibility versus whether they are practically accessible. So I just think I'd be willing to talk more about sort of at a different time how to make sure our sidewalks are usable for everyone. So I wanted to say that I think the city manager's comments felt more like they were directed at the specific legal definition of our requirements, and not necessarily implying that therefore they're perfect for everyone. But that is a concern for me.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That's absolutely correct.
I second that concern.
Any additional deliberation, comments and deliberation? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of moving forward with the annexation, or with the motion as stated, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So any participant not satisfied with this decision may appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the date of the decision. We'll now open the hearing on case file PC 24-06, an application for a zoning amendment, zoning and comprehensive plan amendment. We have the address is 602 South 15th Street. The applicant is requesting a zone change from low density to high density residential, conditioned with a development agreement. And the owner is Martin Kribs. I know you all heard me say this before, but we're going to say it again. The order of tonight's proceedings shall be, first we'll have a staff report, followed by additional correspondence, the applicant's presentation, public testimony in favor of the application, public testimony in opposition of application, neutral testimony, rebuttals by the applicant, questions for staff from the council. We're then going to close public testimony, and after the record is closed public testimony, no other testimony, comments will be heard unless the council reopens testimony for a specific question. Then we'll go to council deliberations, and finally, a final decision. If there's folks that want to speak, we're going to ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and Councilor Covey will let you know when the time is up.
And even if you submitted the form for the last hearing, if you want to speak for this hearing, we'd encourage you to fill out a new form, just so we can keep everything separate. So I believe there's more there. If you don't take the last one, so the last one's there, flag at me and I'll make some more copies.
And we will first hear from those that are here in person, followed by those that are online. For those in attendance, please fill out a form, submit it to the city recorder. Do we have anyone signed up for by remotely? So, any questions should be addressed through me. Please state your name and city of residence for the record, as a city hearing will be recorded. And please keep your testimony concise and to the point. The city council will make a decision tonight on the matter to be continued, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain in the future. If the matter is continued to a time and date certain in the future, then this will serve as the only notice of that date that you receive. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. Similar to the last presentation, these are the criteria that the city council must use in reaching a decision. Your testimony and any evidence must be directed at those criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to the decision. Please describe how your comments relate to the criteria. Again, any decision on this application is based on the applicable criteria, despite the importance of other issues or concerns. The council can only base its decision on whether the evidence shows the application complies with the criteria. The city council's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Failure to raise an issue in sufficient detail to allow the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other concerns related to the proposed conditions of approval in sufficient detail to allow the city council to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now, I ask the members of the city council to disclose any ex parte comments, bias, or conflicts of interest, including site visits. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte content, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether or not you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Councilor Crocker.
Yes, I visited the site today, and yes, I plan to participate. I just looked at it.
Thank you. Councilor McMorrin.
I interacted with some folks on some social media groups, directing them to information about the hearing and providing information about the process, but I didn't offer any opinion. I plan to participate in the hearing.
Councilor Andrade.
Site visit, plan to participate.
Councilor Wilson.
Myself as well, site visit, and I would like to participate.
I also did a drive-by of the site, and I am going to participate as well. We will now hear the staff report.
All right. The property owner is requesting a change to the zoning from low-density residential R1 to high-density residential R3. As a condition of approval of the high-density zoning, the applicant has negotiated the terms of a development agreement that will limit the type of development allowed on this property to no more than 16 single-unit houses with a shared access road and centralized common area. The applicant submitted a Type 2 site design review of the proposal in line with the restrictions of this development agreement, which will be reviewed by staff if this application for zone change is approved. The site is located at 602 South 15th Street, across the street from the Mill Pond Crossing subdivision, which similarly is zoned R3 and has a development agreement in place that limits the type of development allowed in that development. The application is following a Type 3 quasi-judicial procedure as required by the Philomath Development Code, Chapter 18.105.060. Staff reviewed the application and found it to be complete on October 14th, 2024. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 4th, 2024, following which it approved the findings of fact and recommended the City Council approve this application for zone change / comp plan amendment. The City Council may either adopt the findings of fact recommended by the Planning Commission as presented, or modify the findings of fact following the public hearing and deny the application. If denied by the City Council, then the property owner may file an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA. The criteria found in the Philomath Development Code is used to determine whether the application is complete and if the answers and material provided by the applicant satisfy the applicable criteria. The purpose of the hearing is to determine if the application conforms to the applicable criteria as required in the Philomath Development Code and decide whether to approve or deny the application based on applicable criteria. The city received 2 letters in support which have been entered into the record. The city engineer also provided comments that are incorporated into the staff report. Findings of fact are as follows. Section 9-1 of the comprehensive plan provides criteria for changing the comprehensive plan map by a property owner. Table 18.105.020 of the development code provides comprehensive plan amendments shall be reviewed as a type 4 legislative decision-making procedure. However, the city attorney has advised to process this application as a type 3 quasi-judicial proceeding. The property owner is requesting the city to change the comprehensive plan designation of the subject property from the R1 low density residential to R3 high density residential, constrained with a development agreement limiting development to 16 1- and 2-bedroom houses sharing a common lot. The subject property is comprised of 1.59 acres. The surrounding areas to the north, south, and east are inside the city limits. Adjacent and or abutting properties inside the city limits are developed as residential uses. City facilities such as streets, sewer, storm, and water are not located on the subject property, but the property has access to hook into the existing system along 15th Street. The proposed plan designation is deemed more appropriate than the current plan designation. The city has the ability to provide water, wastewater, storm drain, and street facilities and services. Section 9-1 Plan Amendment and Update of the Comprehensive Plan provides for the 3 ways to amend the Comprehensive Plan. Section 1 provides the owner-initiated amendments and review criteria. The criteria are 1. Comprehensive Plan Amendment initiated by a property owner of the city. Demonstration that the proposed plan designation is more appropriate than the current plan designation, taking into consideration public needs, alternative locations, or changes in land use since current designation. The current plan and zone designation for the subject property is for low-density residential use. The land inventory developed as part of the city's comprehensive plan periodic review in 2021 and shown below demonstrates that the city has an abundance of residential zone land. The table reflects that the city has approximately 6.25 times the supply of low-density residential lands needed and a deficit of high-density lands needed for the next 20 years. This indicates that the city needs to actively pursue opportunities to get more high-density lands in order to meet the housing demand over the next 20 years. The concept behind the proposal is to create a cottage cluster, which is currently not listed in the zoning code, but would be allowed in the R3 as a multiple dwelling units on a single lot. In the current zoning code, this would be looked at as a multiple family property consisting of single unit detached houses or condominium complex. The proposed pocket neighborhood or cottage cluster of 16 smaller single unit detached dwellings sharing a common lot would be able to reduce construction costs and improve affordability. As an R1 zoning district, the maximum density is roughly 5 units per acre, not including ADUs that would be included. The proposal provides for just over 10 units per acre. The issue with creating a traditional subdivision is the required 56 feet of right-of-way for a street serving more than 4 lots. The second issue is related to wetlands mitigation. The property contains wetlands which cover a portion of the middle portion of the property. Approving the zone change will allow a cottage cluster layout to preserve more of the wetlands by building the houses along the perimeter. This would not be feasible with an R1 subdivision and with a 56-foot right-of-way. Staff concludes that the R3 zoning district, tempered with a development agreement limiting development to no more than 16 1- and 2-bedroom houses, is more appropriate and more beneficial to the wetlands impact than the R1 zoning designation. The proposed zoning will allow the proposed development, which will be a cottage cluster. This approach can only be done in the R3 district currently. Knowing that a full build-out of R3 would fall out of line with the character of this area, the owner and the city are proposing a development agreement that limits the development of this land to no more than 16 single-unit detached dwellings consisting of 1- and 2-bedroom homes. Additionally, the property is not utilizing fill and will be using flood flow-through to prevent increased flooding downstream. The height of the proposed units will be the same as the existing R1 regulations on building heights, 30 feet maximum. With the agreement and housing design, adverse impacts on adjacent land will be minimal. With the possibility to preserve existing wetlands with the concept plan and the development agreement, city concludes that this rezone is more appropriate than keeping the zoning as R1. The Public Works Director and engineer provided feedback, and the following were comments regarding access and ability to provide city services to the lot. The assumption is on 16 units. The analysis is similar to what was used for the full build-out R1 analysis. For the city's current water production capacity, they have 2.180 MGD, or 1,000,000 gallons per day. The city's current peak day demand is 1.685 MGD. The additional peak day demand from the Kribs annexation property, if approved, will be 0.010 MGD. The water system has adequate capacity to serve development. This evaluation does not take into account the current construction of the new water treatment plant, which will more than double the city's production of capacity by the end of the calendar year. For wastewater, the city's current average dry weather wastewater flow is 0.708 MGD. The additional ADW flow from the Kribs property would be 0.004 MGD. The wastewater system has adequate capacity to serve the development as proposed with the development agreement. It appears that the storm drainage improvements to serve this property can be installed and connected to the existing drainage along South 15th Street. The zone change from R1 to R3 with the development agreement capping new housing units to 16 would increase daily traffic counts on 15 feet from 90 90 trips to 160 trips. When considering daily load or peak hour traffic, the impact on the street system would be minimal. The property is located within walking distance of the elementary school as well as the planned neighborhood park in the Mill Pond Crossing subdivision. The increased housing units from 9 to 16 will have minimal impact on the city's park system. Conformance with the plan policy are based on the following factors: citizen involvement, housing, urbanization, public facilities and services. The application meets the comprehensive plan's primary residential land use goal to maintain and improve existing residential areas, develop a variety of housing types in order to meet the city's housing needs. That concludes the application for rezone conforms to the applicable comprehensive plan policies. The criterion is met. There are now 19 statewide goals under Oregon's land use law that the city's comprehensive plan was based on. Oregon's statewide goals are achieved through local comprehensive planning. The findings in compliance with the applicable city policies above demonstrate compliance with the applicable statewide goals. Staff concludes that the zoning map amendment from low-density residential R1 to high-density residential R3 complies with all applicable statewide goals. Staff has prepared recommended motions for after your deliberation. Does the council have any questions?
Are there any questions from the floor? Mr. Andrade.
When looking at storm drainage capacity, I hadn't realized, does that take into account flooding as well, like big flooding events, or is that just your average day-to-day storm?
This goes with more of the average. It doesn't, like in the analysis that was provided by Public Works, it's kind of going for the average in a dry to show what the capacity is in dry conditions, because that can help assess how much capacity there's going to be in those larger events as well.
Is that, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is that something that we can take into consideration when, reviewing these kinds of land use decisions?
Yeah, so the current state law is that post-development, the water can't flow off of your property any quicker at any greater velocity than what it did prior to that development. And so there's a number of ways to do that. We see the use of bioswales, detention ponds, those types of things that are engineered based on the actual development that's taking place on site to ensure that the impact downstream isn't greater post-development than it was pre-development. Again, we get into the nuts and bolts and the the engineering of that at the building level when they're doing pre-construction, meetings with the engineers. So at this level, we're really just looking at, does the city have storm pipes out on 15th Street that can connect, that this property connect into? Do we have open ditches? You know, what does it look like infrastructure wise if we were to change from essentially, you know, 9 houses with ADUs would tap into that existing storm system as opposed to a high density development, R3 of 16 houses tapping into that development. So that's all we're really considering at this point is, you know, is it going to tax that storm system any greater depending on the type of, you know, zoning that's going to be there? The analysis here is that it's going to be equivalent.
Mr. Nielsen.
Okay, stop me again. The development agreement, limiting it to 16 1 and 2 bedroom, is that legally binding even after if we were to approve this? Is that something that they are bound to maintain that level?
Yes, that'll be recorded against the property. The only way to change that would be to come back and propose something different.
Okay.
This body would have to approve.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Or a future body.
Oh,
a
yeah,
future-
future body, okay.
Unless you're gonna be on council for 50 years.
Shit.
Mr. Cocker.
So what if we change the zoning and then he sells the property to someone else? Is this binding for the new owner?
Yep, it carries with the land.
Thank you.
And I note that you reference in here, and I can't find it despite my efforts, but you reference somewhere in there, you related it to 9 housing units versus 16. I'm curious to know why you referenced the 9, because previously we talked 16, even as an R1, it's actually eligible for 16 units.
Yeah, so in the analysis of that, it's not taking into consideration ADUs. So when I mentioned it's like 5 units excluding ADUs, that a number of 9 would be based on 5 single-family houses. So essentially, is how that would be. And that's for the R1. That was the analysis that was provided by public.
So as an R1, it would be eligible for 5 single
It would be
family.
up to 8, but like they do when they do their analysis there, it's like on the law, it ended up being 9. 9 is what is considered there to be 9.
It's 5 units per acre is the
per acre,
rule of
right.
thumb when you take into account lot size
Yeah.
and street and all the infrastructure goes with it.
So it
And
could
so
fit
8 to 9, it was, you know, it was a rounding, and again, to be conservative, like, okay, let's look at it at, let's say they, we're able to get 9 lots and the street through there rather than the 8, so let's look at the 9 versus the 16, but, again, the numbers aren't that significant of a difference.
Right, but if we did have 9 or 8 single-family homes on that property, would there be sufficient space for an additional 8 or 9 ADUs as well?
Well, with the way this is going to be done, if it goes to there wouldn't be ADUs.
I understand that if we do rezone, but without the rezone,
Yeah, they could perceivably do, and it's going to be tight, 8 single-family lots. With that, the thing that in the analysis of whether it's going to be of a better, like with R3 being a better use than the R1 or a better application, is because one of the criteria or the factors I looked at was wetlands mitigation. So if we require the let's say it's not approved, and we do the R1, they're gonna have to put that 56-foot right away, and that's gonna be in the middle of the property. That's the only way they're gonna be able to maximize. In putting the right of way in the middle of that, that's also where the wetlands are at. So with their proposal, they're gonna be able to preserve some of the wetlands, but that if they don't do it that way, they're gonna have to actually mitigate, pay credits or whatnot to get the wetlands put elsewhere. So that's kind of
but to answer my question,
oh, sorry.
9 housing units could be allowed plus 9 ADUs as an R1.
Or 8 houses with potentially 8 ADUs. So it'd be equivalent.
Yeah, so 16 units total. Thank you. And then with
Sorry,
an
I didn't answer your question.
I was gonna get you there, and then if we rezone to R3, right now, under the development agreement, we're also talking about 16 units.
16 units. Yeah, that's 16
is
units
what?
total, no other units added on top of that.
Thank you.
It was more of a, and so kind of to give a little more, we were worried about the changes to flood regulations for FEMA insurance, and so that's why it jumped the gun, like in the future, or if it got to R2, and like down the road, if we did that, then cottage cluster would have been allowed thing. So it's kind of trying to keep it in par, and then also the precedent of an agreement that limited the development at Mill Pond, also a precedent to try to keep things in par, and that it wouldn't be spot zoning by doing so because it's across the street from it.
Thank you. Councilor McMorrin?
I'm gonna basically repeat your question just because I want to make sure I'm understanding everything right. So if we don't approve the rezoning to R3, they can still build the exact same number of dwellings, but we would tear up the wetlands.
And potentially, and with I put the caveat in that in theory they could put 80 on there, but because that 56-foot right away, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. So 8 houses with 880
Right, sure.
would be a stretch, but theoretically,
Okay.
they could do that.
Depending on the size of the houses and size of the lots, and they've not submitted.
Right.
The conceptual they've submitted is what they've submitted. We've not seen a conceptual for 8 separate tax lots.
Yeah.
With the street going through there, so we're going off of some rounded numbers of 5 units per acre. But Michael's correct in his statement that I mean, that's what that's the highest, most advanced use we're looking at.
Do we have a minimum square footage for R1 for a house? I know we have.
It's 7,000 square feet right now, or for the house itself now.
I was like, wow, I'm breaking the law.
For the house, it gets a little squishy when you start talking with the building inspectors on what it qualifies. I mean, it's less square footage, and it's more, it has to have a dwelling area, it has to have a bathroom, it has to have a kitchen area. So there's some minimum things it has to have, but they don't have a state mandated minimum square footage. But by the time you have all those things, you're in the 300 square
So
foot.
it's not like a.
Bathtub can only get so small before it's not a bathtub, right?
And is that the same for ADU? Is there a minimum that they have to, I mean, it can't be 200 square feet or 100 square feet because it has to have.
The same argument, it's gotta be a residence, right? So it has to have all those things that are required to make it a residence.
You know, larger than 900 square feet under.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So is there any additional correspondence beyond the items in this agenda packet?
No.
Okay. We will now hear the applicant's presentation.
Have a lot to add. Marty Kribs again. I don't have a lot to add in the initial presentation we did during the annexation, but I am here to answer any questions that anyone might have.
But not yet. We'll offer an opportunity for questions in a little bit. Thank you for being here. That's all we have for you for
Excellent work.
Thank you.
Does anyone have, oh wait, we know that they do. So now first we will hear comments in favor of the application.
Can I ask real quick, just as a point of order, John and Drew, neither of you marked, I'm assuming you're both opposed? Can I? Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna mark that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, we did.
No, we have 2 neutral.
Okay. So seeing none in favor, we have now, does anyone want to speak in opposition? And I know the answer is yes. So first of all, we have Michael Henthorn.
Well, one, I appreciate the position that you all get put in as an elected official operating within the state law and the county and city requirements. It's an enviable job to try and sit here and tell you what lived experience looks like, and without those measurements that, you know, the city staff can provide you, guide you to not end up making a legal error. So all I can tell you is common sense would tell you if you had a pan of water and you put 16 blocks into that pan of water, the level is going to rise. And as someone who is a neighbor to this property, the more development we place in a floodplain, the surrounding neighbors are affected. There's no way that logically you can get away with that. You can read the, statistics of what your sewer system or your flood systems are designed for and what numbers, add up to what. But as a neighbor, 1 inch of additional water is the difference between me having to move out all 4 of my horses, my alpacas, my chickens, my ducks, and goats. And as two 72-year-old people trying to make our retirement life pleasant, a flood condition to us is an emergency. And the more development you force into that South 15th Street neighborhood, we are negatively affected. And I can only ask you to think long and hard about whether the south end of Philomath, with the current conditions that are facing us with the Marys River flooding conditions, if that's the right place to put 16 more houses. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Mr. Steve Boggs.
Steve Boggs, 280 South 15th Street. I've lived in that area since 1962. Between 62 and 75, it flooded every year. The last time we had a flood recently was 2012, and it was clear up to the house right next door to us. That's before the Miller mess came. And when you start paving that planet over, and you bring in more pavement, the water has nowhere to go except down to the river. The river can't accept it anymore because it floods from 13th and south of 15th, and it comes right in that corner down there. And the more water comes in, it has nowhere to go because the Marys River is already full. All your storm drain has nowhere to go except right up 10, 13, 14, City Hall, the backyard here. Happens all the time. So basically, I would hope you guys would say no and leave it as it is. Basically, and do your site visits whenever you get a chance. Always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sidewalk issue, real quick. I know where he's talking about. That's up across from Mark Street. In 1990 or 89 and 90, the city mandated we, the homeowners, put in sidewalks. And we said, well, who's going to move the telephone pole? And they said, build your sidewalk around it. So we all had to. So yeah, there's telephone poles right in the middle of the sidewalk up there.
On South 15th.
We were required to do that, so, by the state.
Can you fix that now? No kidding. Thank you. Mr. Drew Pell.
Thank you guys for hearing me. Yeah, Drew Kell, neighboring house. I appreciate what Mr. McMorrin had to say about the reality of some of these situations where it might meet the laws required by the state or the city, but how it's affected the people that live there has been different. Speaking on the sidewalk, I take my 2 boys on the stroller and we have to go in the street every time to get around the telephone pole. So it's not as sufficient as to say. There is concerns too about, maybe it doesn't affect everybody, but the market value of the house, right? You can build more units that don't necessarily meet the standards of the neighboring houses in terms of the market. So it's going to affect us, the people that live there, majority of the people versus one person benefiting financially in the sake. The other question or concern I had was with the, I guess, publicity or showing where the site was. I know you guys visited today. Was there a sign out there? No sign. And it's just a concern, which I called about the concern multiple times. I know our neighbor Mike did as well, about whereabouts that sign was through the process. Initially, it did start. I did see it, and that's how I got introduced to it. And I did my research by looking up the sign, but it was on the north side of the property, so a smaller piece of the lot, which is kind of misleading in this case, because there's a small lot, the house, and a bigger piece of the land that's on the other side. And then I did notice it was moved recently, and then I have pictures of it on the smaller side. That was the first initial. It was moved, and then after I called in the whereabouts the sign was, I looked again. It was in the ditch. So just being able to inform majority of the people. I mean, there could have been more people who come here to speak their mind about the truths and concerns that they had. So I do have concern on that piece as well. So just in the future type of deal. But yeah, appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Then we have Mr. John Grimm.
John Grimm, I own the property at 640 South 15th Street, for you guys on the TV. I guess this was a little confusing because we're doing both of these. Just so for future stuff, I already talked basically, and I should have been talking this time, not last time, because I understand the health
I'm like stopping you, but people don't like that.
Oh. But yeah, I understand that. Yeah, same issues basically. I'm concerned about the zone changing. I'm concerned about the market value on the property. Doing the smaller houses, that doesn't work with the neighborhood. It's a family neighborhood, and then we're putting in 2-bedroom places. Fine, a young family could be there. It's a good starter home. But then having these little 1-bedroom places as well, I'm just concerned about what that's going to do to the neighborhood and stuff. It's a family neighborhood. I mean, all the houses that are in the other one are families. All of us are families. I built that house 19 years ago, I believe it was, and raised my 3 kids there with my wife that was sick. That's why I did the adult foster care. I'd love to work with you guys on the sidewalks. Being the adult foster care, I'm also the president of the union for all the adult foster cares in Oregon. So I definitely know the ADA stuff. And you may meet the letter of the law, but you do not meet ADA. But my main concern is property value, the neighborhood. It's a family neighborhood. And now we're doing these real little units and stuff, and that really concerns me. Everybody's concerned about the flooding. Like I said, I was the one kayaking when that was all flooded to go get the porta potty for the horse place next door. So it is a big concern. My place, it was 1.5 acres when I bought it, got annexed into the city for health annexation. So I know that stuff. But to do the smaller density and stuff, I'm really concerned about that. I'm concerned about the neighborhood and it being a family neighborhood. And we talked about schools, but 1-bedroom places, what kids are going to be going there? I mean, there's not room for kids too. So I don't have a problem with doing some affordable housing for families and stuff, but that is a family neighborhood, and that is a big concern. And, it's a big difference going from and we know we can't get 8 houses on there. I mean, I know that. I had 1.5 acres, and, I have the same issues as he would have on that. We were able to get, we could get 5. We only did 3 houses on that property.
30 seconds.
Okay. And, but yeah, the how that might change the dynamics of the neighborhood and stuff. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with, some single family homes there. That would be great, but this sounds a little different for what our neighborhood really is there. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you for all that. Do you have any neutral? We do. Mr. Steve Kruger. Krieger?
On the property, it's 619 South 15th. And the concern I have is parking. The My house, the driveway is fairly narrow, it's a little bit long. So if you're not gonna block in your spouse, even with a garage driveway, not blocking your spouse, you end up with a garage driveway. And so my concern is spillover parking and not enough adequate parking for the new development across the street. My experience is from Grand Oaks, living next to a condominium, where they provided all the parking that was required by law. But in reality, the parking is still clear up the street, and so that it didn't work out. So I have the same concern here.
Thank you. Next we have Gary Rogers.
Gary Rogers, and I own the house at 623 South 15th. And the reason I showed it as neutral here is because I'm a realtor, longtime realtor. I've developed properties, and I also do property management, and so I'm familiar with a lot of the laws regarding it. One thing I want you to realize is there was a lot of discussion here about it being a family neighborhood. Remember, the definition of family is one or more. It got changed to one or more many, many, many years ago. And you cannot discriminate by saying, oh, this should be a family neighborhood, meaning a larger house. We can't do that. So don't go on that slippery slope. Also, in presenting this tonight, it wasn't presented that this is actually a condominium complex. This is not designed to be rental houses. These houses will be able to be sold separately. The land will be owned by homeowners association, and then there'll be condominiums there that can be sold separately. I've heard talk about that these would be owner occupied required. And so that's one of the things that I wonder what you'll do with that. Because owner occupied being required would bring up the status of the neighborhood as far as how it comes across to neighbors. And so that could be helpful. One of the things that I see in looking at this is with these being 30 feet tall as a possibility, they'll be pretty vertical buildings in there. And that's a way to reduce the footprint of the foundations, which will improve water flow. One of the things that's also talked about is sheds. He talked about that he was going to put storage in there, which I gather means sheds. Those sheds should also be looked at like they need to have water flow. And otherwise, they won't be necessarily required to be permitted. So I'm thinking you'll want to look at that when you first look at this development proposal. There was talk about the zoning and needing more R3. I was at a presentation here a couple months ago, talking about a property on North 9th Street, and what we were looking at then is there's plenty of R3 zoning. And if anything, we need more of other zonings. I'm just pointing out that in that area of town anyway, there's a lot of R3 zoning. In looking at this plan,
30 seconds, excuse me.
In looking at this plan, one of the things you'll see is there's a lot of distance between parking and where homes are. There's a couple of spots where it's over 200 feet. That's going to be a lot for somebody to carry their groceries, so be careful with that. Sidewalks, you were talking about them running all the way to the next street, but I think really what's going to happen is this development would only be required to put sidewalks in front of it, and there wouldn't be any parking over there. That's going to be a problem. I do see that Steve has a good suggestion there.
Sorry, your time is
That's
up.
fine. I think I've got it all covered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. Appreciate all that you're trying to do there.
Thank you. Now, does the applicant wish to provide any rebuttal? Or the applicant's wife is welcome.
That's not.
She's
welcome. It's okay.
Right, that's again. As far as anything new, so we studied the issue of the distance of walking from parking area to the house. And it's been something we wondered about. I spoke with Ross Chapin, who is the godfather of pocket neighborhoods. And this is a common type of development within this vernacular, this genre. And it seems to be well accepted, well received. What ends up happening is by walking to the units, folks tend to interact more and it builds more of a community. So we see it as a feature more than a bug. And so it is that way by design, and we believe it's going to help make it a more successful development rather than a deterrent. Other than that, I don't think there's anything really new from the annexation commentary. Does anybody, is now the time to answer questions?
As soon as you're finished, yes.
Okay, I'm finished.
Are there any final questions from the council for the applicant? Councilor Crocker?
I was counting up and looking at the parking. There's 16 parking places designated on the thing. But then you've also got the driveways to each home. Are they not going to be able to park in their driveway?
I think we have 24 spaces in the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and then from the wider parking area, those are walking paths. So there's no driving.
I thought they were driveways. Okay.
Yeah, so it's 1.5 spots per unit.
Thank you. Councilor Nielsen?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
My question too, is there an owner occupied provision? Is that part of your plan or not?
Well, so this is market rate housing, and we're going to sell them to people, and whether or not they rent them is, I don't think, something we can necessarily have a ton of control over. I will say that looking into regulatory issues around lending and so forth, that to qualify for certain loan programs, we need to have at least 75% owner occupancy. So it is the plan that we want this to be a community. It's not intended to be a rental property, and I personally think that having more than just a couple of renters or maybe any would detract from the community atmosphere that we're hoping to build.
Councilor Kazi?
Could you speak to the comment that these are condominiums and the land would be owned by a homeowners association? Is that correct?
It is. So the plan right now is that the entirety of the structure would be owned by the homeowner. The underlying land would be part of the condominium association, which each of the owners would be a member of, and so they would jointly own the land. So I think from a perceived, the reality of owning one of these things is it's going to be identical to a single family home, other than you're collectively maintaining the property as a group, which I think is an enhancement to the neighborhood. We expect and want people to do a better job of maintaining the ground so that it maintains the value.
I hate to be the stick in the mud, but I'm going to just say it one more time. Again, we're just to remind the council, we're looking at the zone change and really the land use impacts of a low density development on this lot versus a potential high density development on this lot. The intentions of the current owner, though interesting, may not be as applicable to the criteria of what the impacts on the land and the surrounding properties is going to be. And so I just want to be cautioned that we're not making decisions when we get to deliberation based on what this current property owner intends to do with the property, noting that, again, the development agreement will carry with the land, and that's going to limit the maximum that can be built there to the 16 individual 2 to 3 bedroom homes. But ownership and management and all of those things aren't part of the decision criteria. They're really based on earned the owner at that time and what they intend to do, but we just want to steer away from that a little bit if we can in our questioning.
Can you speak to the flow-through design and how the expected impact on flood elevation levels and how, the difference between that versus a single family?
So, the criteria for developing in floodplain in the city of Philomath has adopted, I believe this letter is fifth floor to be 1 foot above the flood elevation. I think in practice, it actually ends up being 2 feet. Actually, this is kind of a question too, that any materials below that or within that freeboard of 1 foot need to be flood resistant materials. So it's more practical to have it be 2 feet higher. So I think the elevation on the site is an average of 264 above sea level, and the firm map shows the base flood elevation of 268, which leaves us a finished floor elevation of 269. So that's 5 feet above current / original grade. We would end up with a finished floor elevation of 270. I'm actually proposing that we go higher than that and that we make use of that space underneath the houses for storage and other things. And those images, character images kind of reflect that idea of how that would look. There's a FEMA designed flood vent and a FEMA guideline criteria for how large those vents have to be, and I believe it's 1 square inch per square foot. So a 1,000 square foot house would have 1,000 square inches of flood vents, and so you can purchase these vents from various retail suppliers, and you install them in the foundation, and they meet the FEMA guidelines.
Thank you. Councilor McMorrin.
There's currently a house on the property. Do you know if that house meets any of these flood safety guidelines?
It does not.
Okay.
The house, I'm not exactly sure when it was constructed, maybe 1940, I think it was post World War II.
Yeah.
My dad said it was a air house.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, there are, in the house, there's actually just saying anecdotally, there's no evidence of flood damage within that house. Just saying.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because like sometimes in this discussion we're talking about it as if there's nothing to increase the floodwaters on the lot right now, and now things would be added that would increase the floodwaters, but we would actually be taking away a house that currently does not match the flood guidelines. Okay.
That's correct.
Councilor Crocker?
I would like to clarify the shed that you talked about. It looks in the drawing that we have a possible garage underneath, or is that the shed on the very bottom floor? The living is up above, is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, so in some of the units, so there's, we have 2 styles of units, and, this is very conceptual, and we've been kicking around different ideas, but in every case, there's a storage and or garage area that is at grade, and then the living area is above that baseball elevation.
So it doesn't take more of a footprint for the shed, is what I'm saying. It's the same footprint as the house.
Correct.
But it couldn't be used as a garage, could it? Can they drive there if it's just walking paths?
Some of them could be used as garages, depending on their proximity to the parking areas.
Okay.
And some of them not. This was a conceptual solution.
These are all subject to change.
Yes.
Don't
make Chris say it again.
That's right.
Just because you made reference to these, is it okay if we submit what you'd submitted these elevation drawings into the record for this hearing as well?
Yeah.
We reference them,
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make copies and we'll make a copy and put it in the record as well for this hearing.
Thank you. Councilor Nielsen?
Another question, I was, okay.
I have a question, but not for you, I don't. Well, regarding the development agreement, can you summarize the development agreement for the public? Like, what are you committing, what are you committing to exactly? Is it just the 16 homes, or is it?
So I understand the remembering, it is the 16 detached, single-family residential structures. And within that lot, we're constrained by the setbacks and various development guidelines that are already part of the land use and building code for the city of Philomath. So, there is some opportunity for some degree of modification of those buildings, but it's fairly constrained. And we submitted a conceptual parking and stormwater and utility plan. All of those are conceptually designed to service those buildings, and if we were to modify the number of buildings, we would want to change the required number of, or not required, but the proposed number of parking spaces. For example, we would have to come back and request a modification or another hearing or some such.
And getting at something Councilor Crocker suggested, or with this development agreement, let's say the next property owner said, I really want to have a garage, and I was gonna dig out my crawl space and the garage, and I'm gonna install a driveway. Is that allowed?
My understanding is no. That would be, well, it's not never allowed, but it would require another application process. And once the homeowners association is in place, that would be an extraordinarily arduous road to go down. So, I think, once we sign off on the development agreement, we're pretty committed to this plan or something very similar.
Any other further questions for the applicant?
I do have one. Have you, and correct me if I can't ask, I'm good at asking questions that can't be answered.
I'm ready.
Have you, he is ready. Have you personally visited an existing cottage cluster to see the layout of other existing built, constructed cottage clusters?
Visited one in person. I've read books, talked to folks, looked at plans, and visited with people who have developed a large number of them. It was part of our analysis on what we thought was the highest and best use for this property. So, how we got here was, we looked at renovating the existing home, what various kinds of home configurations we could do, and based on the City of Philomath strategic plan and the housing analysis and our own market research and various things, this cottage cluster emerged as a great option. So, and it's, there are some folks in housing, which I do understand, and I appreciate their concerns, but it seems to be a good option. We're actually really excited about it.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Appreciate it being here. Now, does any of the council have questions of staff? Councilor Kazi?
The development agreement is for 15 years. So at the end of the 15-year period, let's say for whatever reason the land has not been developed, the agreement expires. Is there anything to prevent someone else from coming in and putting in an apartment building?
There's two components to that answer, and then Chris can correct me if I'm going outside of the lane. So going, With the future provisions of FEMA putting up an apartment complex down the road, we'll say after July, let's say something came after July, will be nearly impossible. The second component is that the city is in the process of doing some changes to the zoning map. That it's going to be like for next year, and this area is going to be like Mill Pond. And if this was approved to be R3, it's going to be down zone to R2 to fit the middle housing option, because both Mill Pond Crossing and if this is approved, this development would fit that middle housing component that the state is wanting cities to implement. So that's kind of like giving the long term. But in short, if the no net loss standards from FEMA start coming into play, with the standards that they have in place, like how we calculate it, I'm not sure if anything's going to develop after that goes into place. So that's kind of the two-pronged answer to that question long term.
But we cannot consider any future decisions by the council about zoning in this decision.
Yeah, that's correct.
Could you just, I'm not sure I heard you correctly about the FEMA changes in July. After that, it would be zoned R2 or R3.
Well, our current like long-term, and I think, yeah, it's like can't consider the future, but yeah, it's like in the future that we're getting downside, because realizing what's coming, like middle housing is going to be the most that should develop on like in this area. So that's separate from the FEMA requirements, just the no net loss that's going to make any development, if that is implemented. There's some, they did the environmental impact statement, so there's kind of some delays of what's going on. The governor's now involved, so I don't know when that's going to go into place. But if the FEMA insurance guidelines go in for the no net loss, I'm not sure if anything's going to develop there in the future. That's because that is a looming future reality, and I don't know if anything's going to shift that tide at all.
And similarly, with the existing FEMA rules, we cannot consider future FEMA rules in this decision either. So I think we probably shouldn't even mention it.
Yeah, I think as I stated, the FEMA rules allow for development within the floodplain, and any development by anybody is gonna have to adhere to the FEMA rules in place at the time. We're doing a land use approval, a zone change, and so to rely at all on what FEMA rules are is really irrelevant, because FEMA rules could change tomorrow. They could change in July. So it's really about what is the impact on the infrastructure, water, sewer, storm, streets, parks, schools. I mean, what is the impact of the zone change? And I feel like anytime we're looking at the flooding issue, we're really just on a very slippery, wet, underwater slope. It's just, so I just very caution that a lot. We don't know what those rules are gonna be. I think at the same time, I think it's safe to say we are seeing a trend towards smaller lots, smaller houses, to try to curb the affordability issue that we're facing as a state and as a nation. And we're not immune to that in Philomath, right? So we're not seeing proposals come in for giant, 3,000-4,000 square foot homes. What we're seeing is smaller lots, smaller units, more affordable. And I think that trend, at least in the mid future, at least the 15 years here, that trend will likely continue. So hopefully that answers your question without making too many assumptions of things we just don't know about.
Councilor Crocker?
Correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like the environmental impact, the floodplain being left alone and building around, that it's better for the flooding and for the environment to be the R3, so they can build around the outside and leave the center where it floods the worst. Also with the flow through, because if we kept it at R1 and they were to put in 4 houses or 5 houses, just regular houses, that would be worse for the flooding than this design with the flow through and the outside design. It seems that that's correct. Is that right?
I think it's correct, but also outside the, it's not one of the criteria.
Yeah, and you're mixing a little bit floodplain with wetlands, right? So in the staff report, it refers to the wetlands issue. There's wetlands that have been identified in the central, allowing for the zone change to allow for that. Floodplain's a little different. Floodplain's gonna back up and affect anybody within that flood area.
And it floods already anyway, so It's not like it's bringing on the flood, it's flooding already.
Any further questions of staff? Does Counselor Andrade?
Because I am concerned about flooding in general, and I'm not quite sure if it pertains to this situation, but so, and the reports have identified what needs to be done in order to meet capacity for a certain services provided by the city. When looking at the development agreement, I couldn't quite tell if there's still an opportunity to find out more information of like, oh, actually, it turns out that we do need to increase the storm drain size or something like that. Is that still a possibility? Like site design review? I wasn't quite clear on how that.
Yeah, so, and you make a good point. So again, everything that we're talking about here is conceptual as far as what's there, other than what's spelled out here, the 16 units, separate, 1 to 2 bedroom max, right? So maximum height, similar to the rest of the neighborhood. As what's gonna be needed for a storm, that'll be done at the engineering phase when they're actually doing the engineering for what that layout's gonna look like. And they'll submit that during their site design review, and that does get reviewed. It gets looked at by the city engineer, public works director. So we're gonna make sure that the storm pipes are big enough, the sewer pipes are big enough, the water pipes are big enough, everything downstream is big enough, right? We're not gonna connect bad example, we're not gonna connect a 4-inch or 8-inch sewer line into a 4-inch line down the street, right? So all of those things get looked at by the engineers at the time of development. But for here, the analysis is, do we have the capacity even out in the street? And what we've heard from public works engineers, the capacity is there to do it. And just to be very clear, one of the city services we provide is not control the floodwaters, right? Like we don't have dikes, that's not a service that the city provides. We lean on FEMA to mandate what has to be done in order to mitigate impacts of construction within the floodplain. That's not a city service that we really look at in this analysis. In other jurisdictions, it might be. If we had dikes and we were controlling flooding and elevations of water, we just have none of that infrastructure, and we're not expected to control floodwaters.
Thank you.
Okay, does staff need to respond to any questions or issues raised by public testimony?
I had one point I just wanted to bring up, and it's more of a correction in the staff report that I just caught as Michael was reading it, top of page 4, in reference to the water capacity. The new statement says, I think it's the second to last sentence, evaluation does not take into account the current construction of the new water treatment plant, which will more than double city's production capacity by the end of the calendar year. That's not an accurate statement. The reservoir will be completed by the end of the calendar year. The treatment plant's going to be another year and maybe another 6 months after that to get it up and running and going. So that's coming, but it's not by the end of the calendar year.
That'd be quick.
Love to have it done. I would love to have it done a year ago, but I just wanted to correct that notion. And then the other one, again, I'm the bearer of bad news tonight a little bit. I'll say it now that I've said it. The planning commission's been a little more involved in this than the city council has, when we're looking at some of these code changes, especially some of the new changes that are coming down from Department of Land Conservation and Development in the state. One of those provisions that is new for all of developments in Philomath is that we can't require minimum parking standards on development anymore in Philomath. The new state rule is if you're within a half a mile of transit stop, a bus stop, we cannot require a minimum number of parking spaces, and that goes for residential, commercial, etc. So talk to the state, and the powers that be. I know there were several concerns raised about parking, and we're not gonna get into this development specifically, but I just wanted to generally give the bad news that we're essentially removing all of our minimum parking requirements out of our development code in this update, this, like, very near future update of the code. But even those in there now, we can't enforce by new state law that trumps our local laws. So I know there's concerns about parking. We still have standards that we'll keep. So if you are going to provide parking, we still have to meet the city standards and what that parking looks like. But I am with you. Many of you, I hear the concerns about parking. We've gone up and beyond in several of the last of them is to ensure that parking wasn't going to overflow into other neighborhoods and onto other properties and impact. But we essentially got our legs taken right out from underneath of us at the state level on the parking issue. So it was mentioned by a few people. I'll just float that out there again, not germane necessarily to this specific application, but for what it's worth.
Thank you. And Michael?
And I'm just gonna piggyback off of what Chris said. Yeah, on October 23rd, I believe was the day when the LCD let us know that our zoning code is in violation on the parking requirement. And it's a half mile from a transit line or a bus stop. So if there's a bus stop shelter, it counts. And frequent transit now is hourly for Philomath, according to the DLCD. So yeah, pretty much there's a little tiny sliver maybe in the northwest corner of Philomath that might, parking requirements may be germane at this point, but yeah, most we can't enforce no such thing as minimal parking requirements now. Thank you.
Okay. So does the applicant waive its 7-day period to submit a final written argument after the closing of the record? Public hearing is not closed, right, Chris? Council, no, any deliberation from council? Council McMorrin.
I wanted to make the comments to the effect that we have to figure out what we're doing, and none of us are lawyers, and this we do our best, I think, to balance what we're told by our lawyers and what we hear from you. And I am very grateful for all of the comments this evening. I feel like it was all very productive and insightful, which, as we know, is not always the case with public hearings. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful to the applicant for addressing some of those.
And I just want to remind everyone that Ashley, our city attorney, is still online and available to answer questions if we have any.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello, everyone.
But we do
yes.
On call.
Yes.
I was just going to make one other quick note. I know there's a lot of discussion sometimes about, family neighborhoods or family housing, and I grew up here. I'm a big fan of family-oriented stuff. I think the thing I always want to emphasize is that I grew up here, but I still want to live here. And I don't have kids yet. It would be great to at some point, but I want to still have a place to live here before I have kids. And so that's why I'm personally a big fan of providing more options for various age ranges. I think something we run into in Philomath is we raise really great kids with great educations and great skills, and then we don't have opportunities for them to stay here, so they leave, and we kind of export our greatest asset, and then maybe they come back in 10, 20 years when they have a family and they're ready to go, but we miss those prime years of entering the workforce and developing our economy and everything. So that was just one thought I always have on these things is I'm all for family housing, but I also think we should have opportunities for folks to stay here and continue to contribute the gifts that we've given them as young people without families.
Thank you. Councilor Causey.
I would just like to say that I'm a strong proponent of what has been proposed here, and I understand your concerns. I've raised a family myself, but we have such a tremendous housing shortage in this in our town, in the state, and in our entire nation. I think I read today in Representative Gomberg's newsletter that 1 in 8 children are houseless, school children. And we've just got to build more affordable housing, and this concept and this development are just right in the bullseye of what we need. And I believe that under the R3 zoning, what has been proposed here is very well thought out, very well designed, and it's within the constraints of what are required by our building codes and by FEMA. So, you know, if they can meet all the requirements that they have to meet, I find it very hard to decline it. And I guess with that, and
You may.
I move to adopt the findings of fact for the zoning map comprehensive plan amendment as presented in the staff report for planning file PC 2406 and approve the application with the proposed condition of approval. And I assume the condition of approval is the development agreement. Okay.
With that stated, I'll second that.
So we have a motion made by Counselor Causey and seconded by Counselor Nielsen. Any further discussion?
Since you offered. I just wanted to respond to the question about have the applicant visited a cottage cluster. I am not the applicant, but I did visit one. I think it was in LeGrand, and it was specifically for veterans. And obviously, this would not be for veterans, but I just wanted to speak to the community aspect of it around sort of the common lawn. I think, you know, especially maybe for a population that may need extra support or may, you know, need a family, a support system. I think having that communal experience, it does work, I guess, is what I saw at that cottage cluster in LeGrand. So I would hope that a similar thing could happen with this, even though it's a different population. But
yeah.
Any additional comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion carries unanimously. Let me read this. Any participant not satisfied with this decision may appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the date of the decision. And I was gonna do that. And we're gonna take a recess and come back in 5 minutes. I'll close the hearing.
Good idea.
Sidewalks.
Yes.
Just so
Excellent. Thank you all for the lively discussion that we've had so far. Next, we have the third public hearing. Uh-oh, and I lost my script. Oh, here they are, sorry. Yeah, here it is. So now we're gonna open the hearing on case file PC 24-04. An application to amend the Philomath Development Code with a climate-friendly and equitable area overlay. Does any council wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest?
I'll just note this is a legislative proceeding, so we're not concerned about ex parte conduct. This is legislative, so it's a little different. The script's a little bit different as well. But yeah, just proceeding wise, and I should probably add that in the script somewhere that this is a legislative proceeding and kind of set the table a bit more. So just wanted to know it's going to feel a little bit different than the previous two hearings that we've had tonight because it's legislative in nature. So we're really, with this question, we're really looking for actual conflicts of interest where you or a family member has a financial gain or consideration, or a potential conflict of interest, somebody that could get some type of financial gain or be financially harmed, you or your family, for these legislative matters.
Potential conflict of interest or actual? No, seeing none. So, the order of tonight's proceedings shall be first the staff report, followed by the applicant's presentation, the public testimony.
Cross number 2 out, sorry, it's just gonna be the staff.
The applicant.
I was gonna say, would that still be Chris?
Followed by public testimony, and council questions of staff, council deliberations, and then a final decision. Is there anyone signed up to give public comment?
Nice. No one cares
No
about
one remotely either?
The legislative.
Yeah. They trust us so much. You know?
I'm waiting for Brad to step up and be like, I'll do it. So the city council will make a decision tonight, or the matter may be continued to a time and date of certain in the future. If the matter is continued to a time and date certain in the future, this will be the only notice at that date that you receive. Land use decisions such as this case under consideration this evening. This isn't a land use decision. Legislative decisions.
It's a decision.
Is it a land use? All right. They're evaluated against applicable statewide planning goals and the guidelines and criteria from Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan. We will now hear the staff report.
This will be much shorter than the previous. The city has been working with Cascades West Council of Governments in collaboration with the Oregon Department of State Finance to implement the new rules around climate-friendly areas for CFA. This new overlay district, required by new state rules, is intended to provide high-density mixed uses within the city. The proposed text amendments are attached to the staff report as Attachment A. The findings of fact are as follows. The standards in the new CFA chapter apply to all new developments. New developments shall include construction of new structures on a currently vacant lot, reconstruction of structures that have been raised, and reconstruction of non-conforming structures that have been damaged pursuant to chapter 18.160.
Michael, let's presume that everybody's read the rest of those, just as we don't have the people in the audience here. We'll presume that they've read them, the rest of the findings.
Okay.
Invited.
Okay, I'm good with that. The application is following a type 4 legislative procedure as required in the Philomath Development Code chapter 18.105.030. Staff reviewed the application and found it to be complete on October 14th, 2024. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the code changes. The City Council may either adopt the findings of fact recommended by the Planning Commission as presented, or modify the findings of fact following the public hearing and deny the application. The criteria found in the Philomath Development Code is used to determine whether the application is complete and if the answers and materials provided in by the applicant satisfy the applicable criteria. The purpose of the hearing is to determine if the application conforms to the applicable criteria as required in the Philomath Development Code and decide whether to approve or deny the application based on the applicable criteria. The purpose of the hearing is to determine if the code amendments are sufficient to address their intended purpose and use. Section 18.105.060 provide the criteria for a type 4 legislative amendment. Decision-making criteria are enumerated under subsection G as follows. The recommendation by the Planning Commission and the decision by the City Council shall be based on consideration of the following factors. Statewide planning goals. This is not a comprehensive plan amendment. The statewide planning goals and guidelines are not applicable to amending this language. Notice was provided to the Department of Land, Conservation and Development. Through Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments, DLCD indicated that they wanted a multimodal gap summary to be included in the findings of fact for the staff report. The finding was added to the updated staff report dated November 14, 2024. Intergovernmental agreements address coordination in development and are not applicable to the amendments. Any applicable comprehensive plan policies and provisions of this code that implement the comprehensive plan. Compliance with Chapter 18.135 PMC shall be required for comprehensive plan amendments and the land use district map and text amendments. The following policies are applicable for this consideration: citizen involvement, economic development, housing, and transportation. Staff concludes that the review procedures have been followed and the provided code changes comply with the requirements. Staff prepared recommended motions after your deliberation. And with that, I'll yield for.
Great, thank you. One second. Is there any additional correspondence beyond the items included in the agenda packet?
No.
Are there any questions of staff or clarifications of staff report at this time? Councilor Warren.
Just to clarify, when it says staff concludes that the review procedures have been, I'm assuming that means you concluded that you followed your own procedures?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm just making sure I'm understanding that right. Okay.
It's
right.
the applicant, but we had to make sure we're getting everything.
Right, okay.
And then following our own evaluation criteria.
Cool.
Okay. We'll now move to public testimony. Folks can keep your comments 3 minutes. Does anyone wish to speak regarding this application? We got 2 of you in the audience.
You have to speak. Oh, you're just pressuring.
What about Crystal? Okay.
Just kidding with you all.
I know. Laughter's not allowed during the city council.
It's tired of you.
Does the council have any further questions of staff? Does the staff need to respond? No. Staff does not need to respond to any questions raised by any testimony. There's no app. You can scratch that one.
We would still technically have a 7-day period, so you can.
Does the applicant waive if you want to edit it?
The city waived its 7-day period to submit final written argument.
Who wants to make that motion?
Michael can make that call.
Yeah, we can make the 7-day requirement.
Thank you. You're welcome. Public hearing is now closed. Does any council member have any questions of staff? Councilor McMorrin.
In reality, does this change much from what is already the case? It feels like we're mostly just drawing a line on a map.
There are some changes, so it will allow for more density. The height requirements are not as strict because of what the CFA requires. The bigger difference is if someone came in for downtown and wanted to do affordable housing, what would differ from the downtown code C1 or C2 is that if they wanted to put residential on the bottom level, we would be required to allow them to do so. So that's the big difference between the two that I can see with how all of our uses and everything are.
Counselor Crocker?
Looking at the building height, if a single-story building is 20 feet and that's the minimum, and then a maximum height is 50 feet and that's 4 stories, how do you get 4 stories in 30 feet? Isn't that what it says?
Yeah, there are some things, because I know in building code, it's like a typical floor is 10 to 12 feet, depending on how you do it, but you'd have low ceilings and stuff because you got all the things in between. But essentially it was saying 50 feet or 4 stories, so that was kind of where the language was. So it's like, I think that perceivably at 50 foot, you're going to have 4 stories, it's not going to be 5. And about in the single story with the roof and everything, it's like perceivably 15 to 20 feet would be what you're looking at.
Short rooms.
Yeah.
It just oddly.
Any further questions of staff? Counselor Kazi?
I move that the city council adopt the plans and guides presented in for planning file PC 24 proposed amendments to the development code.
Thank you.
I'll second.
We have a motion made by Counselor Kazi, seconded by Counselor Nielsen. Any further discussion?
One point of clarification.
Yeah, it's 24 at 4. Somehow that got.
First of all, I'm complaining because on number 2, this map, I cannot read those street names, so I'm not really clear where we're at. But I can read the one that says Develop Newport Highway, and since when is it called that?
Not by RGIS.
Why do they call, I mean, isn't it Highway 20 or 24?
Yeah, there are some, like,
It's
they call it the Corvallis Newport, that's like how ODOT designated, but that's not how we name it.
I remember when I first got a GPS and it was like Highway 2034, Main Street, Philomath, like Alice Newport Highway. And you're like,
So,
It just doesn't seem very accurate.
I'll give you the boundaries because, yeah, this is definitely hard to read. It's like I had to see it on bigger words, borderline legible.
I got a magnifying glass.
So about 250 feet north of College Street from 12th to 15th is your kind of northern boundary. The southern boundary goes between 350 and 450 feet south of Applegate, essentially on either side of 13th Street. So that's kind of your east, west, north. But from 12th to 15th is your east-west boundaries.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimously, thank you. Anyone not satisfied with this decision may appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the date. Okay.
I do want to take 10 minutes and just say, appreciate all the work that the commission put into this. There are hours and hours and hours of work spent here. And so they did a great job of working through the minutia to make your job much, much easier. So thank you, Planning Commission, for all the work, and Michael, great job.
And Justin Peterson at OCW, probably he did the heavy lifting, I think, with the reports.
Excellent, thank you. Next, we're going to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion made by Councilor Moore, seconded by Councilor Kazi. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda, we have Ordinance 887, proposing regional plan for regulation on operation of psilocybin product manufacturers and psilocybin service centers, second reading.
You said they were going to do public comment, but there isn't none. Is that why you just skipped it over quick? Just need to.
I move on page 4, line 12, to amend public park to playground.
I'll second that.
Can I speak to the motion?
Where are we?
Page 4, line 12.
Of Ordinance 880.
Got it, yes. Yes, please speak to that. So wait. We have a motion made by Councilor Warren, seconded by Councilor Andrade. Can you speak to the motion?
Yes, this was just, I was trying to listen to some of what we heard at our town hall and try to find some sort of compromise there where I think there were folks that felt this was too broad and there were folks that didn't, but in listening to the folks talk about why they wanted parks in there, it felt like the only thing that kept coming up was because there's playgrounds and their kids are on the playgrounds. So I figured if that's the reason for not wanting it to be near a park, we should just say playground instead of park, and then that. I'm just trying to kind of find a path that can please as many people as possible while maintaining the intent of line 12, but being more specific with kind of where the kids are most likely to be.
Chris?
Logistically speaking, we've got Del Collins Breeder Board Park, which is at 15th and Applegate, Corvallis Newport Highway.
Do you mean Highway 2030?
Yeah.
Boulevard?
So I think the point would be, you know, if we're talking about where's our commercial district and where would these types of facilities go, not being able to be 1,000 feet there is really going to shrink the map down of where you could locate something. And again, to Councilman McCormick's point, the point is about keeping kids from being exposed to it, seeing it, having the exposure come to them, whatever there might be. I think you're getting at the crutch of it. So I'm just thinking about along that commercial corridor. We've got the new Veterans Memorial Park, which does have a playground, so that one would still be counted. But the Del Collins Readerburg Park.
Isn't that within 1,000 feet of the school though?
But it starts as its own.
Yeah, but it would start anew 1,000 feet, right? So it.
There's also the one north of downtown.
Pioneer Park.
Yeah.
Pioneer Park on 12th Street, so that would affect down maybe like College, you know, area. So I just want to put that, I'm not saying for or against, I'm saying logistically, that's what it would do to impact the map of like where these could locate.
So any other suggested motions to amend, or any other potential amendment?
One second, Chris, do you need to read the title?
We will read the title before we vote on it, yeah.
I'm not ready to talk about this part though, right?
Yeah, that's what we're on.
Well, no. Well, this.
87, yep.
Yeah, okay, page 2, line 2, who is not a natural person. What does that mean? I mean, I'm a little grumpy about that.
AI is what we're talking about nowadays.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
couldn't we word that differently?
I'm gonna call out on Ashley on this one. I believe these are taken from the language from the state.
What does that mean?
Ashley, did you hear the question?
Could it be a corporation?
I did. Yes, that's exactly right.
These corporations are people, my friends.
Oh, okay.
Corporations are people.
They're not natural person.
No, they're not a natural person, but they are a person.
Okay, I thank you. I understand that now, but.
Nobody understands it, but.
knows that.
Thank you, Ashley. She pops in. Any other suggested edits, amendments?
Okay, yes.
Yes?
We want to vote on did we vote on the one?
No, I was just gonna see if we can do more than one at once,
Yeah.
but if we don't have any others. So we have a motion on the table, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so this is the second reading of this. And the title is, or should we let Ashley do it? Ashley, you want to read the title? That was Jim's only job. So.
I've never done that before, but I could definitely do it for you if you would like me to.
I need a break.
Okay, I can do that for you then. All right. Do you want me to just go now? Okay. Ordinance number 887, an ordinance of the city of Philomath imposing reasonable time, place, and manner regulations on the operation of psilocybin product manufacturers and psilocybin service centers.
Joke, this was our former city attorney always made a joke that this was his only job and did it well.
Well, I'll continue to loom in the background, you know, until I'm called.
Thank you. So we do this with a roll call? Go ahead.
Christopher McMorrin,
Yes.
Lisa Nielsen,
Yes.
Jessica Andrade. No. Ruth Posey,
Yes.
Diane Crocker,
Yes.
Chaz Jones.
Yes. Excellent. Motion carries 5-1. Passes. Next, we have a second reading on ordinance number 888, declaring a ban on psilocybin product manufacturing and psilocybin centers and referring to ban to the voters. Any discussion? We don't need any discussion. Ashley, do you want to read the title of that, even though I just did?
Sure. I will do it again. Ordinance number 888, an ordinance of the city of Philomath declaring a ban on psilocybin product manufacturing and psilocybin service centers and referring the ban to the voters.
Thank you. With that, we can go to another roll call vote.
Christopher McMorrin,
Yes.
Lisa Nielsen,
Yes.
Jessica Andrade,
No.
Ruth Posey,
Yes.
Diane Crocker,
Yes.
Chaz Jones.
Yes. Excellent. Motion carries 5-1. Next on the agenda, we have resolution 24-22, Enterprise Zone School.
This is a second.
What?
Is that what title? I think there's a mistake in.
Oh, well, we just approved it.
I thought we just.
This is part of it.
The battle. The ballot title will come back and be reviewed by the council before.
It's just a
it's
title.
there, so.
I think that's what
The ballot, yeah, the ballot title's just for an example of what you can use, I believe. I don't think that's any sort of binding.
Thank you for the clarification.
But
Councilor Causey?
because both ordinances have passed a second vote, they're now law.
Yep. And it's
30 days from now.
Yeah. It's 9 o'clock.
So resolution 2422, very quickly, Christopher Jacobs was here earlier this evening. We talked at the quick break and I said, don't be your family. I'd cover this. If you have any specific questions, it's there, but essentially this is new state law. It requires that the school enact this fee and that the cities and the counties agree to that. We've only got one commercial property right now that's taking advantage of this. But anybody that new comes in would get notice that on year 4 and year 5, you don't get be excluded from the city portion of these taxes. We're going to add that city portion of the taxes in, and you don't get to waive those. So it's a little bit less of a discount or benefit to them, but not substantially. The city's taxes and the county's taxes will still be reduced or not collected, but they'll have to pay the school portion of those taxes in year 4 and 5, which currently they're not required to do. So just the way that the state is regulating how these enterprise zones are able to defer property taxes. So the school district's already approved it. If we approve it tonight, then I'll go to the county. They're having their meeting first part of December. And then they'll go back to the date that we're compliant and we've got our fee established. John, right?
So to make sure I understand this correctly, it's not necessarily, it's not imposing a new tax, it's just saying that that tax comes back into the enterprise zone, businesses sooner than it would have.
After year 3 instead of after year 5.
Cool, thanks.
Well, so what happens if we don't pass this?
Then we're not compliant with state law that requires us to pass or establish a fee of some sort.
Okay. And then what happens?
Ashley makes a bunch of money.
This is one of those where the state says you have to do this, and
Okay.
we have to do it.
Okay.
We're not compliant, we're not compliant.
I could figure out the actual, implication for you, but I would assume some sort of fine.
To approve 24-22.
I move to approve resolution 24-22, establishing an enterprise zone school support fee rate as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Nielsen, seconded by Councilor Cosby. All in favor, please use your hand with the aye.
Aye.
Unanimously. Excellent.
Executive session.
Executive session. Not handy, but I will have. Recording.
You don't have to announce it to the recording.
Oh, do I need to read the recording in before?